the obvious tips like don't ride muddy trails and avoid braiding tracks around puddles. There's probably a few things your buddies have left from you when it comes to wet weather riding. Lucky you have me here. I'm gonna spill the beans today. Make sure you're riding all year long and staying comfortable while doing so. Now, usually a wet weather ride, the hardest part is just getting out of the house, but it's always worth it. And we have a saying here in BC, if you don't ride in the rain, you don't ride. Now, where I live, we're really lucky to have plenty of good trails to ride in wet conditions, as do lots of other places in the world, like the UK, for instance, because it's always raining there, right? However, if you only ride flow trails, or if you live somewhere with really muddy or clay dirt, just avoid riding for now. Those trails are not gonna benefit from having huge trenches down the center. Maybe use this time to brush up on some more armored trail riding, or organize your sock drawer, because we all know you've been putting that one off. First up, what do you even wear on a ride like this, and how does one prepare for battle in wet conditions? I can tell you, that plastic bag method, probably not gonna work here. Might be a little sketchy and get caught in your rear wheel. Personally, for me, I like to layer up, stay nice and cozy, but if you live somewhere tropical, rain could mean hot, sweaty, and muggy, so maybe you don't need that many layers. Start with a wool or breathable material base layer. That way, even if you get wet out on the ride, you're still gonna be nice and warm under your jersey. Now, personally, I almost always wear a chamois or a bib. It acts as another layer underneath my pants, keeps me nice and warm on the bike as well. Knee pads are also a nice addition. If you wear any kind of pads, knees, elbows, whatever, just gonna give you another level of insulation and keep you a bit warmer out on the ride. Getting to the outer layers, I like to wear a nice pair of pants. Most pants are gonna provide some level of protection against the elements. These ones that I've got on today are actually water resistant, which is pretty rad. And obviously a rain jacket. Even if you don't have a rain specific jacket, something of a windbreaker is gonna keep your core a little bit warmer out on those wet days. And if you can, get something with some zippers, either a zip on the front or under the pits, gonna help you for that temperature regulating, not have you feeling like a big old sweat bag on the trails. Now, I know some people are firm believers in waterproof shoes and waterproof socks. I gotta say, I've never tried the waterproof shoe thing. I do fine with my shoes. You're gonna get wet anyway, so just embrace it. But if you don't have waterproof socks, what I would recommend is something with a wool blend. That way, even when your feet get wet, which probably inevitably they are going to, your feet are still gonna stay nice and warm. Wet gear does not do a good job at insulating you and keeping you warm out on a bike ride, especially when the wind picks up. So do spend a little bit of cash, treat yourself to some nice pieces that are gonna last a long time, something with wool or a synthetic material that if it gets wet, still gonna keep you warm. Personally, I always wear gloves. It just gives me another level of protection between the elements and also the ground and the trees. If you don't wear gloves, maybe now is a good time to pick up a pair for these wet rides because slippery grips are super dangerous. If it's really, really wet out, I'll even bring 2 pairs of gloves. I'll keep one dry, either in my bibs or in my pack. That way, when I get to the top of the climb before the descent, put on the warm gloves so that I can actually feel my brake levers, keeps me safe out on the trails. And if you're a really, really serious rainy day shredder, you might even opt for some waterproof gloves. I am a big fan of eyewear. If you don't have riding glasses, grab a pair of goggles because keeping the rain and the mud out of your eyes is gonna be awesome and you can actually see the trails. Crazy idea, right? Maybe bring a little wipe with you so you can give them a wipe down between laps, keep that vision rolling smooth. And at the very least, if you don't have any glasses, a cheap little fender on the front fork will help a ton. Final little hit of preparation here before you hop on the bike. Try letting just a few PSI out of your tires. Only like 1 or 2 PSI is gonna make a big difference on wet terrain. It's gonna allow your tires to grip onto those features. We're nearly ready to hit the trails, but I like to start by adjusting my expectations of the ride in wet conditions. We're not usually firing on all cylinders, especially if it's cold and wet, and we're not reacting with cat-like reflexes. So stay a bit safer and ride longer into the season by taking it down a notch when you need to. Okay, let's go. It's not uncommon for your brakes to be a bit less powerful in wet conditions, especially if it's cold and wet. So do your braking in technical terrain just a bit earlier than you think you need to. In general, it's a good idea to avoid off-camber rocks on a really wet day out there. However, the trail I'm riding right now, it's got a lot of really grippy granite rock. Even when it's wet, this rock is still quite grippy, so I'm not too worried about it. However, if you're riding somewhere else in the world, usually really wet terrain equals very slippery rocks. So do be careful. Don't go grabbing a fistful of front and rear brake because you're just gonna lock up and start skidding all around. Instead, do a bit of that modulating that we've talked about before, so you're not locking up your wheels at any time. On this particular rock, I've chosen 2 nice points to brake just behind me where the ground's a little bit flatter. It's gonna give me good traction to do my braking and my speed checking before the steeper part of the rock. And then I've got a nice little dirt patch just after the rock, again, to maintain speed, bring it back under control, and make sure I'm not locking up the brakes on the rock. Now this little section of trail does not have a single perpendicular route to cross over. Instead, they're all just kind of funneling downhill. So in this situation, plan B, I would say follow the routes downhill in the trajectory that they're going. Don't try to fight them. If the rain is falling hard enough that it's actually clearing the mud off of the roots, I'll still take a few opportunities to just jump up and over the roots, as long as you're not landing really aggressively and sliding out on them. However, if the rain's not falling heavily enough to clear the mud off of the roots, then I just avoid that situation altogether. I'd much rather stay planted on the ground, right where I know where I'm gonna be. Best case scenario, if you come across nice perpendicular routes like this on trail, just gonna cross over them in a nice straight line. Least chance of losing grip and traction. Okay, focus. Don't brake on wet wood, don't brake on wet wood. Oh my God, don't brake on wet wood, don't brake on wet wood. And now, the best part. Just kidding. But we do have to pay for all that fun we just had out on the trails. So my best tip is to deal with all your yucky mess right away. Don't give it time to solidify and dry up on all your gear, unless of course you're really into that dry, crusty riding pant look. Wet gear can actually be quite dangerous in bringing your body temperature down, especially after a ride because you're not working to keep your core warm. So my advice is to strip off those cold, yucky layers, and if you're traveling back home or away from the trailhead, you're gonna be a lot warmer on the way home. So do bring like a little bag or maybe a bucket to put all that yucky gear in, and you can deal with it later. I like to wash my gear and my bike outside, and if you don't have a hose or if it's frozen mid-winter, then a little bucket will do. It's good as new. Don't rinse off in the shower or just throw your kit in the washing machine unless you really hate your landlords, and definitely don't forget to clean and lube your chain. Well, that's wet weather riding for you. A lot of baggage to deal with at the end of the day. It's always worth it though, right? While we should be conscious and respectful of what we're riding in the wet, don't let it dampen your spirits. Still get out for a little rip if you can. I hope these suggestions were helpful today for your next soggy session. We talked about prep, riding, and tidying after a wet ride. If you guys have some more tips, maybe you live somewhere where it rains all year long, definitely send them my way because I'm sure I didn't cover them all today. This bag lady, she's out.